Welcome back to Understanding VC. I'm your host Rahul. Today, my guest is Terry Chow. Terry is a partner at Alpha Intelligence Capital, a global VC fund that invests in deep artificial intelligence and machine learning technology based companies. At AIC, she leads AI investments across regions with a focus on cybersecurity, fintech, and SaaS. And her notable investments include Rita, which was acquired by IBM, SenseTime, which IPO'd in Hong Kong Stock Exchange, and AI Music, which was acquired by Apple. Before joining AIC, Terry spearheaded technology investments at VMS Investment Group, where she deployed over $180 million. Now let's talk to her. Hi, Terry. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello, hi Rahul. Thanks for the invite. I'm really excited to chat more about AI and investments.
Yeah, you recently moved to Singapore, but yeah, where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I'm born and raised in Hong Kong, and I went abroad to UK for most of my education. And an economist by training, but I pretty much started in private equity very early in my career, and then I was in ventures. So focused with the AI, and we launched our fund with a global mandate in Hong Kong, US, and Paris. But we have recently decided to move to Singapore for a few reasons, including, our entire Hong Kong head office. For firstly and foremost, because of the bipolarity between US and China, investment has been a very sensitive area, especially when you invest in deep tech like we do. So it is just a more neutral state for us in Singapore. And secondly, I think from a deployment and investment perspective, there are a lot of more interesting machine learning capabilities in the Southeast Asia region, which is more reasonable and in terms of valuation and the applications. So here we are, first women on board in here in Singapore, and the team shall slowly, gradually join me here.
Okay. So, growing up, were you always interested in finance, economics? And nobody grows up to be interested in those things, right? What
Oh,
were your other interests?
yeah, I grew up. I think I grew up loving investment because my mom is an investor, and in
Okay,
a way, just properties, just like a Chinese, auntie, like going around town. But she actually is very, smart, and she understood the value of investment. I remember I was around 19 years old, and she told me, how she got to this particular property and how it started from almost, she made a 30-fold in like 6 years by switching to a different properties. And she just asked me, she said, you went to the best school, I sent you the best places. She said, can you beat me in my return? And I was
nice.
like, no, I don't know. I don't think so. Like, I could see myself making a good, income, going to big jobs, but I don't see myself doing that. And I think that planted a seed in my head. I did not plan on going to investment because of that. And I think in so many ways, that I seen her do all of this growing up has really ingrained it like in my system. So I love investment. I love making it like making returns and just seeing things grow.
Nice. Nice. You've been in Singapore for a couple of months at least now.
Actually, 6 months now, a bit
Okay.
over, and yeah.
Yeah. So when you assess the state of deep tech in Singapore, yeah, what do you make of it?
Yeah, so Singapore, it's a very interesting society, and economically, it was, structured in such a way. For example, there's a lot of deep tech capability in semiconductor. It very much started in the 80s, and you could see, at the Singapore, government or the related entities has really orchestrated their approach in creating and maintaining that competitiveness. So for me, that is very interesting. And recently, they have also taken an initiative, for example, to tackle like AI or blockchain innovation. And by when I say that they are orchestrated, meaning that they not only try to build a talent pool and by providing the grants to these, they also move one step further to try to build like an early stage ecosystem around investment in it. But obviously, our fund, our Intelligence Capital, is purely focused in AI and deep tech AI. I would say it is still in the early stage in Singapore. Very much reminds me probably of Europe 5 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago. But there are, a lot of interesting talent coming out in the entire Southeast Asia region that Singapore is very accessible to. and you see kind of like a more spread out team makeup where maybe there's made up a lot of Indian engineering or product center, while the use cases or GTM, the go-to market, is around different Southeast Asia region. So I find it interesting, but I also hope that, with the launch of AIC here, we can also help propel some of the earlier stages AI startups.
Yeah. So, could you talk about a little bit more about AIC and your fund strategy?
Yes. So yeah, we're Alpha Intelligence Capital. We call ourselves AIC. Some people call us AI Capital, but we are a deep tech focused AI machine learning fund that deploys globally. And our fund one was around 200 million, and we just launched a 300 million fund two. And our focus is in the earliest stages, meaning from Series A to Series C. Sometimes we do venture into like maybe a C plus in the earlier or like the D and E, but our sweet spot remains in A to C. And our approach is a bit different because our team is made up of what we call AI natives or AI practitioners. So our founding partner Antoine, he's a three-time AI entrepreneur and sold three AI companies. One to Siri that later became Apple, obviously. One to Sybase later became part of Microsoft, and most recently Sentient Technologies. And the team is split into like half business people like myself from private equity background that learned about AI, and then it also comes with AI practitioners, software engineers, and aerospace engineers that turned into like more finance and investment focused. So Fund One, we've invested 28 companies. We exited seven. We sold four just based on technology. The valuation do not reflect, not based upon on commercial value. So we sold one to Apple, sold one to IBM. We sold one to Biotech in early 23, the largest European AI pure play acquisition ever, and almost 600 million US. So I think the strategy, it's really just reaping its first harvest that we started, 2018 with Fund One, we launched 2022 with Fund Two, and with the recent launch about ChatGPT and also generative AI, we've really come into the spotlight as with AI technologies and the startups that are really innovative. So I'm quite excited as well. I'm also excited to move to Singapore and to be more plugged into the scene here.
Yeah. So, you mentioned Series A to C, right? So, what does a Series A, B, C startup look like in AI in terms of like the progress that they've made for you to look at them?
Yeah. So for startups, really, so we don't do seed because we really need the product, and we're good at understanding the technology stack and the product. So at least for most of our Series A companies that starts, they would have probably completed their prototyping or has a functional product for us to demo on DD on, and obviously a tech stack with some of the capability that are proprietary and internally built. I think we have some flexibility as to whether, how your first commercial use case and where you are, depending on the sector that you operate in. But we would love to see like at least a first, if not a few customers that we could also allow us to due diligence on the capability of your product and whether its usability. So and that's that. We have invested obviously in a wide range, anything from a seed stage company with just maybe 7 or 8 employees to like a large B round. That is, for in the instance like InstaDeep, the one we sold to Biotech, it was
Yeah.
already 100 million B round. So what I'm trying to chart here is that AI is an area of rapid growth, like from A to B, that's already quite a wide range. So in the way that we define it, in the earliest stages is that you are still in the early stage of exploring, maybe you found your first use case for your technologies, but there could be two or three more that you could verticalize on. So it's a wide range in terms of fundraising size and valuation, but I believe where the product and technology stands, it's what differentiate an early stage in the context of a deep tech fund like us.
Yeah. And in terms of deals, where are you seeing these deals from, good deals from, especially in Asia?
Yeah. So we normally out because of our mandate. So I we do 40% US, 30% Europe, 20% Israel, and 10% APAC. That was on one. And that very much because we're ex-China, that very much represent where we see, the represent the top AI talents and technologies, which is, US by far the leader in terms of technology, algorithmic approaches, and also talent, and shortly actually followed by China. But obviously our fund is ex-China, so it's not part of the mix. And then Europe, Israel. So we hope to see a change of that in terms of the Southeast Asia deployment. So Fund 2 is still a really rather large fund in the early stage at 300. So we target to deploy anything between 10% to 15% in Southeast Asia region. And if you ask me what interesting startups I've seen in the region, I think it has really changed a lot. 2 years ago, we would have seen interesting startups, but probably not differentiated in their technology approach. And I'm seeing that change in the last 6 months that I spent here. I've seen local Singapore startups at the advertising tech space actually with a very scalable cookie-free approach where they can really merge intent with real-time surface traffic from the world based here. I have seen other cybersecurity startups that use NLP, natural language processing, to crawl the dark web based here also. But there more often than not, I would have seen a company with a headquarter here and engineering team sometimes in India, sometimes even in Vietnam, which I find very refreshing. That has interesting approach. So to name a few, like computer vision based, for example, what you call no code CV platform, for example, those are starting to become interesting.
So, why do you think US has the best talent and also the best approach, and Asia is lagging behind? Is it because the lack of research pending so far, or?
Yeah, so generally, whether it is from a academia perspective, so both US is most well structured in a way to enable a lot of researchers, not just in the AI space, but in the AI space, they have been pioneering this space since the 80s and 90s, right? You would have seen the first AI lab in the US in the late 80s, even in smaller town universities. So maybe they were not called AI or machine learning at the time, but they were devoted into the research of whether it was neural networks or other graph-based approach. So with that talent pool, and the academia, they could really, yeah, you can just imagine that the next generations that they could create within only university is very interesting. But secondarily, I think, aside from government grants and stuff, they have a lot of connectivity and ecosystem that are built around university, especially the top tier university, to take these companies to spin out. And if I compare US to the UK, for example, known to be one of the strictest and least beneficial to founders when it comes to the IP licensing spinoff. Like US has really already had a very structured approach where you could buy back some license and structure all these deals in a profitable and in a way that incentivizes startup founders. So that's something that they've done really good, and with the history of them just starting much earlier. And if you can see in the last 5 years, there is just so much dry powder from the early stage venture scene that has gone into these early stage startup. It is almost a no surprise that they will remain one of the most talented pool, and it is the kind of like the baby card for most of the most innovative like AI approach. Whether obviously in the UK there are also interesting ones because DeepMind, it is a UK
Yeah.
based company, but if I compare this to Southeast Asia in Singapore, I feel like there is also a good, government accessibility and grant. Generally, I don't know. I'm curious of why as well that we see a lot of academic research done, but less so, in a spin-off or in a commercialized kind of manner. So it could be the ecosystem is still in its early stages of building, and maybe that will really change in the next few years as the region pour more resources into AI.
Yeah. So I read a quote from your website, I think a disruptive technology approach that allows them to grow cheaper, quicker, and much more effectively than their competitors. So this is something that you look for in companies, right? So how do you assess this? No, just before that, no, I had another thought. So I was thinking, like, it a technology needs like a certain number of years, maybe 30 years of research before a venture capitalist or even people can turn this something into a business use case, right? So in terms of that, like, what are the technologies that has achieved that? I guess AI is already there, and biotech.
Yes. So it doesn't take all the technology 30 years to become commercializable. I think it is only in the narrow context of AI, it's a methodology. Actually, it's, the it's 70 years old. It was just not, taken to popularity because firstly, there was no data, very limited data, as you can imagine. There was no popularity of, the internet, which is really the natural ground for creating new data, and there was thirdly no computing power. So these three elements are what AI feeds on, and the approach was there, birthed out of mathematics and statistical approach, and now they can only really come together, have ensemble of different AI technology or methodology together to make a use case viable and interesting. But in terms of, does it take 30 years for a technology to be successful? I highly contest that. No, like Google is the simplest technology. It's a search algorithm, right? And it was taken into popularity in just a few years. Same thing with e-commerce, right? It is not a very difficult technology. There's also some search algorithm involved, but it was so taken into popularity because the market is ready for it, right? And in terms of AI, it also needed an infrastructure where data were flowing freely. So in the first generation, obviously, who propelled that software, and after software came applications, and in between software and application, there's a huge layer of cloud infrastructure, data infrastructure that are being
Yeah.
built. So with these traffic and the structure, I think the time has become quite obvious for AI.
Yeah.
And in terms of different technologies, I think a lot of different technologies will pre-fail, and I think the timing to market really is just dependent on both how disruptive you are and whether it is the right time to disrupt a certain market.
Yeah. And yeah, assessment of a particular approach, so that allows them to grow cheaper, quicker, and much more effectively than competitors. Like, how do you do this when you see a particular startup or a business?
Yeah, so I think to sum that up is really, how do you define like a disruptive approach? And that's something that if you're playing in the field of AI like we do, which is why we have a global mandate as well, so that we can really compare and triangulate the same use case, same technology, but across different regions to understand which one is one, computationally cheaper, or two, has built a very elegant or a scalable way, algorithmic way tools to deploy. So these will define your operating leverage against your competitors, and it will also define, the time that you require against your competitor to learn a new task, to create a use case. An example that I would give maybe is in a company called Osaro in the US. It's a robotic company that does picking and sorting. So they use obviously computer vision and reinforcement learning to help the machine mimic and optimize on how to pick like a human, and and how can you be disruptive against competitors, because there are a lot of robotic. So firstly, it's obviously, can you learn quicker when you see a new fluffy monster that is something that your machine has never seen, and how does their algorithm enable them to learn, instead of in 100 shot or 10 shots, can you do it in a few shots, like, so that learning time, the lower you can get, the quicker you can win and the cheaper you can win against competitors. That's just one example. So, but generally, as you could see in more like the wider enterprise world, like 4 years ago, you would have maybe you would have seen, like say your retail bank, only 20% of your function can be adopted by AI technology or startups. Today, more than 80 or 85% of the function is already AI assisted and can bring your costs much lower. So from both the enterprise side and the startup side, we've seen that taking margins to say in a traditional drug discovery kind of tooling company with a 50% gross margins. The newer versions of the AI enabled ones, like InsertDeep, was 71% in margins, in gross margins. So that 20% made a difference, right, for survival of
Yeah.
every startup.
Yeah. And when you say computational efficiency, it is the reason. So it's just like you said, if it takes 10 shots to learn, if it takes two to three, that is the efficiency that you're talking about, or is there any other aspect to this?
Yeah, so computational efficiency is really important. The my favorite example is really right now that you will really feel the difference is in Web3. So because timing and efficiency is everything. So there are a lot of, tools out there that recreate, a 3D model, whether, from one shot, one photo. So your iPhone can do that, Google can do that. But obviously taking it a step further, it's creating better texture for things, that makes me feel more human, or just doing a complete 3D reconstruction based on incomplete pictures, right? So, and there has a lot of enterprise application towards that. And that's what we call rendering, rendering a 3D image, rendering a
Yeah.
3D videos. And being able to do that, in your algorithms in an asset light manner would really be so important to winning. So that would be the first thing that we will look at when we look at different Web3 applications, because at the end of the day, these will be on your mobile phone in your applications, and the computation will not be done by a huge cloud machine somewhere in the
Yeah.
AWS cloud or in a server. It will be done in your phone, and there's only such a limited computational power that you can use. So the lighter you go, the quicker you will win against your competitors. I think that would be a very good example.
Yeah. Yeah. So people have been talking about how Apple can win the generative AI in the sense, that they can bring this to the phone with the privacy, the angle that they always do. And if, when that happens, they would just beat out everybody else.
Yeah,
It is.
yeah. Yeah, so actually I would say most of the tech giants have a generative AI capability in-house within their different AI labs. And the most funny, I'm sure all of you already know about this. Actually, Google was the first to launch Transformer in 2017, and first called BERT and then now Bard, different versions of them. And they have only taken like a year or two to be completely overtaken by OpenAI. I don't think that it means Google would be incapable, but they've certainly lost their first marketing wall. And people, tend to lose a little bit of faith, and people are turning into ChatGPT right now. And at the future of Google search will likely be in the format of ChatGPT. It will be conversational. I talk to my watch, I talk to my headphone, and then they conversationally or selectively in images show me things. So they will still be capable. Right now it's all the media attention of who does what first. Actually, probably art is very capable to do what OpenAI to achieve, and maybe in 18 months they will catch up. But the most exciting things about the current AI wall is that if you just see how large the clusters of parameters are for each like GPT 3.5 to full version, every year there will be, you can be outcompeted by someone else. So staying relevant for all the tech giants is super important to continue acquiring AI capability to stay relevant. Because
Yeah.
aside from web and application, AI will define the next kind of $1 trillion company, and who wins that war, like whether
Yeah.
it's Apple, Google, all of them stay afloat. So very interesting time.
Yeah, so this is another thing that you spoke about, next trillion-dollar company. So when it comes to AI, I feel that all the existing tech giants are well positioned to capture this opportunity, right? So is there an opportunity for an external company to come, even for OpenAI? I think for them to really like stay in the game, they have to take that investment from Microsoft, right?
Yes. So actually, yeah, OpenAI is one of the few examples. I don't see it now, given the structure of the deal that they have taken on. Obviously, there's a lot of there's pros and cons of being integrated into the Microsoft realm. Obviously, you have all the capability, whether it is a GitHub that you could really launch or AI Copilot with the wealth of the GitHub kind of coding community and the data within it. At the same time, they also, have to profit share majority of their earnings to Microsoft as a part of their acquisition, the 10 billion investment requirement. So I think today Microsoft remains still the most in near term the most likely acquirer to take on that company, and it would be huge if that happens because essentially, but at the same time, it would also limit a lot of the innovation that can happen around OpenAI that, it's already beginning to happening because they can also set up ecosystem around them where they see early stage company that use some of their capabilities. And that's very rich and that would drive further innovation. And essentially, OpenAI was this successful because partially because of its open source mandate and the way that they were able to function as a private company. So so, and as to where the next wave of, trillion-dollar company is, I think, the largest sector is still right now has the biggest window at it because with the current market cap and everything they just have to keep acquiring AI capabilities to stay relevant and stay ahead of their competitors. But I think that this will intensify in the next 2, 3 years. So it's really a good sector for us to operate in because it would be extremely acquisitive where all the public market sectors slow down. You could see a lot of late stage private equity deals not going to make it to IPO because for every one, so in the last 5 years, 1,000 unicorns has been made with a billion plus valuation, but only 200, $1 billion plus IPO has happened. So the conversion is
Yes.
5 to 1 in the public market. So when you operate, in the software stack, but at the same time, AI will become increasingly an intensified level of acquisitions. So I think it also speaks to the AIC strategy that we did not mean to invest in companies so that they get acquired, but we constantly see some of our most disruptive or innovative portfolios get acquisition offers. I think it's also a result of that, and that caused us to sold, a few companies to Apple, IBM, and
Yeah.
also Biotech.
Yeah. Speaking of biotech, the InstaDeep. So could you may probably use that as an example to just explain what your due diligence process is when assessing such a company? Um,
Yes.
we
Yeah.
already spoke about the tech element of it, but there's also another aspect, right? Like whether this can become large and can get acquired and things like that.
Yeah. So we know we have our learnings as well as a deep tech team. So we have 4 to 5 tenants, what we call our kind of investment thesis formulation. So obviously technology has always been the first fence. Like if it is not deep tech enough, even our associate analysts were able to say that this is quite a common technology, we will turn away very quickly in the first or two meetings. But then there come a few elements, obviously, that we have learned to be increasingly important. It's just the team. The team is everything. When you are applying a new technology to a sector, you need someone who is within the team a domain expert, say in the field of cybersecurity, like you were in Rahul, then you need a domain expert in cybersecurity who could help you navigate the biggest gaps or the biggest pain points in the industry that needs to be solved. And at the same time, this team also understands how AI can be adapted efficiently or smartly to this sector. And the third is obviously the commercial element of things is, we now realize that you could apply AI to pretty much everything, but there are areas that it is more pervasive and areas that it has just a higher value add. Like say an example of drug discovery, the value add for shortening, a drug development is in terms of billions, right? That if you are able to shorten that by 6 months, 12 months, you make a huge difference. At the same time, maybe other with context, I know that mental health is a huge thing, but because of the intervention period to is so long, it could take months, maybe years, to improve one's mental health, and it's really difficult today to quantify, monetarily or directly like link and to monetary value. Then in that way, even AI can be applied. It has a smaller value chain, and we would prioritize as a fund uh, those has a higher value. And lastly, is obviously something that we always look at. It's been a challenge for us because our founders are very, like a lot of them are AI technologists themselves. We look for the ability to fundraise, whether we believe this team, the strategy, and the sector is something that they can continue to raise and stay afloat. So, with that said, these are the main 4 or 5 key tenets that we look at as a team.
Yeah. I've never had anyone else say that, the ability to fundraise and stay in the game. That's a very new thing for me to hear. And you talked about the team. So, other than domain expertise, yeah, like what do you think is the most important trait of a founder?
I think generally curiosity for a founder and for everyone, actually, investors as well, because
Yeah.
the world changes every day and technology changes every day. I find the most inspiring people to be constantly asking questions and asking the right questions. And as founders, curiosity is so important because as a founder, as a leader, the captain of your company, you must ask yourself the difficult questions before someone asks you, like where your boat and where your yacht is charted towards. And these are, people will come to you for leadership as a founder and starter. Your investor will come to you for decisions, and you must be the first, who has been so curious to have segmented and understood all your problems. And even if you don't have the answer, but you're curious about different ways to solve it, and you always ask yourself, and that's the most important thing for a founder and for investors. I always remind myself, be curious, not judgmental, because it's easier for us to be judgmental, to have a judgment bias, because, I already learned about this sector. I already know about this. It's probably very hard, already very, very competitive and a plateau for a certain sector, let's say computer vision, because, computer vision is everywhere today. But if I'm not curious to just ask the right questions, if I don't remove that bias, maybe I don't learn a thing or two in that 1 hour, and maybe I'll be pleasantly surprised by both the founder or technology. So it's a constant reminder to do that, I think, for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, curiosity to me personally, I feel that it is a very clear sign of intelligence of a person. It is something that I've noticed, and curiosity and asking the right questions. That is not always. I don't see a lot of founders do that really well, including myself. And sometimes it's because when you ask the right questions, that you might get really bad answers, which you don't want to really get. So there is maybe some sort of psychological aspects, because there are people who build it because the sake of building things and not actually solving problems. Do you notice that? Or
For the sake of just building things and not solving problems.
yeah, as in, like, there are people who build stuff, but is this actually solving the problem? That is the kind of question that you want to ask, right? And people stop short of asking that questions because they like building stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So you build that stuff that that if you don't continue asking questions, whether it is to your customers, you should be building products and stuff just for customers. If you don't ask yourself questions, about your investor, whether it fits a certain mandate, whether the market is ready for this, and you're essentially building something for the future, and you're not there to capture it. So obviously, we've seen a lot of people who kind of build things in their own semi vacuum, and we would also try to advise them, but we would try not to invest in these founders that we don't feel like we can really communicate with them, and it's something that we've learned along the way.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, in terms of like the AI in health tech, right? So there are different aspects to it. We just talked about drug discovery and development, and how it speeds, like AI can speed up things. But if you just were to take an example of, let's say, diagnostics set of things, where AI helps you with earlier, faster diagnosis, definitely AI is a better doctor than a human doctor, given the data that we have. So what does it mean for, like, a human being as a patient, and also as a business? What is a business model, and what are the challenges for a diagnostics AI business
Yes.
now?
Yeah, so I think telehealth is already ubiquitous a sector. So some of them, I think, would have adopted some very basic decision tree, which is a very quite a simple machine learning methodologies. But it's really hard for a machine to move to, say, a diagnostic stage, to understand, how you likelihood of your sickness, or specifically which type of based on your symptoms. But obviously, we also, our team has led a co-investment in a company called K Health in the US. They were able to do that because they have 20 years of diagnostic and EHR, electronic health records from Israel, from the Maccabi labs. And they were able to build like a huge probabilistic model based on that. But still, AI today, unless you got like full FDA approval, the last mile has to be done by a doctor because they can only suggest the diagnostic, but they cannot diagnose you today without, with the right FDA approval. It's very hard to prove today and get that approval. But in general, as a like everyday day-to-day patient, I'm sure AI has already infiltrated in a lot of way in your journey to the hospital in ways that you may not have felt it. So I think, we talked about EHL is starting to, be more complete in certain countries. Actually see a lot of efforts in here in Southeast Asia and Singapore as well, as being a smaller country that would be, an area that could be easily managed. But generally, there are a lot of AI technologies that are being integrated into the workflows of hospitals, or between, or just having different departments talk to each other. And I think that would be the future of, your hospital journey can be really, really optimized in terms of time. That you would go into the hospital, and before that, maybe you can just take a few photos, whether you have a dental problem, take some photos of your teeth, take some photo of certain things. They would try to like lower the hospital bed days. Like for those who do not need care, do not come to the hospital or the ER, right? So you have a pre-diagnostic that really helps you segregate critical and non-critical patients. And I think in the future, care can also be more mobile. There will be at-home care that for the less critical cases, doctors and nurses can come to you. And for diabetes patient, you would have an app on your phone that intervenes, reminds you, tracks all your health data on your watch to make sure that you're in check, right? And then when you come to like the critical cases where you need like MRI, radiology, pathology, you if you're just like a Rahul, you're in your 30s, you're not probably not that critical. You don't understand why you had to wait 3 days for an MRI scan. That's because you're non-critical. The AI have triaged based on the scans or other things, the more critical patients, so that they reduce death rates. For similar methods that are being done at the works, probably that you don't feel in the front face of a consumer journey, but I think you will begin to see a lot of it as the workflow, and the popularity of telehealth together with some AI assisted technologies in play.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, this is all great for from a patient perspective, but for a business perspective, right? Incentives might not be aligned with, right? So, for example, if you take late stage kidney diseases or something, some of the profitable business in that space is those businesses that does the dialysis and things like that. So, if we do an early diagnosis and it does a lot of preventive things, then a lot of businesses go out of business, lose their
But
business.
that's a good problem, right? In terms of healthcare, that you reduce you
Yes.
reduce
Yes.
fatality. But in most country, especially in developed country, you will see medical resources a constraint, right? That you need more than actually is there
Yeah.
supplied for. So in a way, that's where AI can really help. But in every AI or in adaptation of every new technologies or new business model, even there will be winners and also people who don't benefit from it, and that is just the natural progression of most technologies and applications.
Yeah, but there will be like a pushback, right? Because I've heard a lot of doctors really don't care. They really don't care when it comes to like early diagnosis and keeping the patient healthy. They would rather have a late stage and then make more money. It's something that I've heard.
Yeah.
So how do you fight things like that? And then, yeah,
Yeah, so I've seen two camps of how people tackle that in telehealth. For example, people try to acquire their own doctors, right? Because it's really hard to convert the brick and mortar doctors who also potentially, has a different they stress differently whether time is important to save or just to improve the initial outcomes for the patient, and generally inertia to continue doing business the same way that they have done, and that they done for 2 decades, 3 decades. So one proportion, I think, different sectors will have different response. But in the telehealth, you either acquire your own doctors, but this has become increasingly costly. Like you can have 10 physicians, 20 physicians, but can you go like beyond that to have like hundreds of doctors within your network, and being able to make sure that all their time effectively used for, and how do you distribute them, because doctors have different specialties, right? So the other way is obviously to work with insurance interest. So there's obviously in the healthcare space there's a huge value chain that you could dissect through. Obviously, insurers would be one of those who would prioritize probably sharing the same goal as startups. Less time, less cost, less beds. So
Yeah.
so in a way that's also another model that a lot of startups has gone to, white labeling or creating solutions for these insurance.
Yeah. Then there's this generative AI. So just take podcast as this example. A lot of these AI tools have made it 10x cheaper and also made me 10x productive. So what are the consequences of this? I keep thinking about this. Are people going to lose jobs? And generally, I think it'll be a lot cheaper to do a lot more things moving forward, and
Yes.
that future is very very near.
Yes. Yeah. So unfortunately, it will impact the way, the society, or how labor for workforces function going forward. And I believe that's, some sectors will win, some sectors will benefit, but some sectors will lose from it. So in most cases, I think service sector would be the first to be impacted, because although, ChatGPT is not semantic today. They don't understand the logic behind things, but they are very much capable of carrying the same outcomes today in the service, whether it's concierge, whether it is just email typewriter, or just creating a lot of productivity tools. You see the launch of AI Copilot, for example, for coding. So all the lower level kind of capability will be overtaken by AI. So say the non mission critical, non time critical portion of things. But there are also multiple sectors that will also win from this. At the, that you as a investor, or as an everyday investor, you could bet on is obviously anything that has to do with data, because data explosion will continue to be fueled and will be needed in times of AI. So whether it's anything to do with computational power, data infrastructure, containerization of data, and data security, and all of these will be a priority in the coming days. So, and if you're fearful of AI, then how do you lose your job? I think you should really pivot your mind, because you should be everyone. If you think about all the little kids in school right now, I have a 4-year-old, I have a 2-year-old, they're going to code at some point in their life, and they will be the AI natives. They are the next generation are all AI natives. So for them, or for anyone, is that whoever wins in this war is not who does better than the AI, it's who uses AI better. And that will be defining the winners, or the benefactor of our next generation. And I'm very much envious, because I am not in that army, and I would love to be one of those. But generally embrace it, because the wave is coming, and it's actually in the past few months we've seen the AI literacy gone up so much. And I myself, I've also came from a business background and tried to learn AI. Obviously, I had much more better exposure than common people, but if I can learn it, anyone can learn.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I read 2 days ago that most of the job, I think 60% of the job that existed in the 40s or the 50s are no longer there, and there are more jobs now. So it's just that adaptability. I think that is a key, and also, yeah, you have to start using it. But then since yesterday there is another news. Why is this negative view on AI? I don't understand. There is like a huge petition to stop the development of the generative AI models. How does this kill human race?
I think I think people are fearful of this, that AI could overtake, the apocalyptic kind of views of things. But I think that generally they're like really just even within the AI kind of so circles, there are two views of how do you feel ChatGPT is really, really intelligent today, right? So I think we're still very far from AGI at artificial general intelligence. At
Yeah.
least that's our view. That I think today, not semantic. It doesn't mean that next year it will not be, but today is not. It does not understand that the causal relationships, for example, between the ideas they are charting or the underlying concept, the semantics of things. But so then that makes it very far from achieving artificial general intelligence. Obviously, there are ways, obviously, there are tools and other AI capability you can overlay on top of ChatGPT to help you understand why or help them audit why you select a certain text or the temperature or the hyperparameters between things to make it more not black box and understandable. But still today, it is probably very unlikely to be able to make a decision or high level, high value decision like most of us can do. But I understand the fear. But just like when you switch from coal to oil, people do the same thing. And when you switch,
Yeah.
I'm sure, from oil to the EV world now, people will also do the same. It's just a natural progression.
Yeah. I I heard somewhere, people who are afraid of electricity first it came out.
Yes, it's a great
Nice.
example right there.
Yeah. Thank you so much again for doing this, Terry.
Yes, thank you, Rahul, for arranging this. I really enjoy like sharing more views, particularly in Southeast Asia, with all of you.